Fight number 2. This is one I've been super excited about to talk about for a long time. Fight number 2, without further ado, is the climax fight of Chapter 6. It might not be the official climax fight, but for me, this is the climax fight of Chapter 6. Kaleo versus Adarath. This fight is like if Leo versus Jeremiah is the ideology fight of strangers, this is the rage fueled fight of family. There is so much emotion between this fight that it just overshadows everything else. This is about grudges. This is about hate. And all their dialogue, a lot of their actions, a lot of Kaleo's development, really every single aspect plays into this theme of hate and what it means to really hate somebody.
Yeah, this is a fight where both sides want nothing more than to see the other person dead, and you can just feel like the rage that's dripping from both of them through the writing.
Very raw emotions.
So there's actually a line from both the Kaleo and the Adarath post that kind of, I think, really express that. And it starts with Kaleo with Adarath was speaking now, telling him to stand up. Kaleo held the amulet against his chest, squeezing his eyes shut to try and keep the tears from coming. I'm so sorry, Tashi. Was this his fault? Was this because of him? He gritted his teeth. You're a monster, he whispered, gathered his feet beneath him, standing to face his uncle with perhaps one of the darkest expressions he ever worn. I'm gonna kill you, his fingers tightening around the amulet. I'm gonna kill all of you. And then Adarath responds with Adarath watched his young nephew with venom in his eyes as he reached for the amulet and processed everything. However, even with all his righteous anger, instinctively took a half step back as the cabin boy found his nerve. The ferocity and disgust in Kaleo's eyes was on par with Adarath's, though his nephew's anger was flame and fury while his own was ice and resentment. Still, even if it was two different types of hate, for that moment they felt equal. There was an understanding that only one of them would live, since the other one would not permit any other possibility. In that moment, that was the closest thing to a common bond they came to sharing. This is the opening fight. A punch hasn't even been thrown yet, and it's very clear that both of them are going for the kill.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like the polar opposite of the Jeremiah versus Leo fight. Like you can tell, like the chance of there being any kind of like understanding between them is like close to nil, and that they're both yeah, as Spence already said, they're both in it for the kill.
So the history for this fight is now that we got to the juicy stuff. The history essentially boils down to Adarath. It was known as a synonymous of animus, which is a synonym for hatred. Just playing more into that fight. Essentially, Adarath was Kaleo's uncle, or is Kaleo's uncle, and was from his mother's side, and was there when the Court of Creation fell. And the Court of Creation falls because Asmerla, Kaleo's mom, dies in childbirth, and which triggers the succession war that brings out the cult. And that's a whole other bigger story that not the cult, sorry, the fall of the court, and that's a whole other bigger story we're not going to go into. But he's always essentially in his mind associated Kaleo's birth with the death of his sister and everyone he's ever loved. So Adarath is made his first appearance actually in a short story that Elo wrote about the Isaac origin short stories, where he tries to kill Kaleo. When Kaleo's 6, Isaac intervenes and essentially convinces Adarath to like don't kill a child. That's not cool. And Adarath will walks away from that fight, but with the idea of like stay on the ground. Like it would just stay in the Sea Islands. If I ever encounter you in the sky, like you're out of your territory, I will kill you. And this is the first chapter that takes place on the Sky Island, and it's the first time Kaleo's ever been to the sky. So naturally, his first island he ever goes to, or at least not as a baby, is where he meets Adarath, his uncle, who pretty much sees him and is like, "Yep, I'm going to kill you. I gave you your chance. I gave you your out. You obviously didn't respect that, so you're going to die now." And
Just like a kid now than you were.
Kaleo's entire life, he's been terrified of this moment because Anarath nearly drowned him in their first encounter. There's a short story and actually a little animatic that tells about this if you ever want to go and review it.
And you should.
Yes, you should.
So, like, there is a lot at play for both of them. These people genuinely, they've only ever met once before, but it was a horrible interaction. This is the second time they've met. Kaleo took a liking to the resistance leader Tashi, who Adarath just slayed in battle, and it is just this like drag out fight. And I also love the themes here because we talked in that Adarath quote. I always wrote Adarath being as kind of like this cold anger, where Kaleo's anger, and Elo wrote her anger as hot. And it's actually awesome because that visualization takes place in this battle. Adarath has like ice creation magic, so all his things are ice based, which is a little more obvious. But Elo takes full advantage and uses things like oil grenades and then creating a fire blaze. And later in the fight, pulls out literal lava, which is just this idea, this reflection of how like hot Kaleo's anger is. So we really get this idea of like fire versus ice, hot anger versus cold anger, resentment versus hurt. It's so good on so many levels. I don't think there's a fight in all of Aouria that is thematically appropriate as this fight.
And I just want to say, just how well, just speaking, just going to Adarath for a bit. I just want to say, just the general build-up Adarath had as well, since he's been a presence throughout this chapter. His fight with Taishi in particular, just it helps give him this air of menace, and not to mention also kind of pretty much everyone. Yeah, Taishi is probably one of the more sympathetic, more likable characters in the
Is
chapter.
it Taishi or Tashi? I always thought it was Tashi.
Oh,
Where how do you pronounce it? Taishi or Tashi?
I believe it would be Tashi because Taishi would have an eye in there somewhere.
okay.
Does it have an eye?
Not that I'm seeing Elo spell it.
Oh, Yellow could never possibly do wrong.
Continuing on, we are professionals, I swear. Just having Adarath, flat out kill Tashi, just I guess
Gives like a little chip on his shoulder, gives him a bit more menace.
so yeah, just
And it's notable because, I mean, apart from early on, there haven't been a great many character deaths on the hero side.
Yeah, really not. Yeah,
yeah. So seeing him kill Tashi not only adds some extra stakes into the mix, but also kind of gives both Calio and the audience both a reason to have a bit of a grudge against him, I guess you could say, to put it lightly.
once the fight gets going, the fight boils down to Adarath making various ice familiars. So he makes like a bird, he makes a bunch of birds, he makes a swordfish, he makes I want to say he makes a bull.
It's one of the big moments, I believe.
Yeah, so he makes a whole bunch of different ice figures that Kaleo essentially has to kind of fight off this little army while coming up with a bunch of different techniques. And Kaleo takes a bunch of heavy hits throughout this fight. Like there's a point where Kaleo is like desperately trying to keep up and he modifies a part of his own skin to stop a bloody wound and he turns a part of his skin into leather, which is just body horror. And like Kaleo is desperately trying to keep up in the entirety of this fight. And one of the edges, which is kind of both another really good thematic edge, is Adarath can fly when Kaleo can't. So Adarath uses his wings to fly and dodge a lot of Kaleo's attacks, or like put himself like above him for like he has the high ground essentially for the majority of this fight. Gru, I think we're gonna need a picture of Adarath having the high ground.
I understood that.
Obviously.
Insert picture here. Kaleo had his wings cut off by this court. The last time this court really hurt him was when they took his wings as a baby. So the fact that like Adarath's using that advantage to hold the edge in this fight is huge. Well, that and also the just mountains of mana sap he drinks the entire time.
But I just want to say, I do like the line from Adarath. When Calio asks what he has to fight him, he just goes, "My wings, unlike you." Just the most pettiest thing possible, but I still loved it and just helped show off, much Adarath absolutely hates him.
Yeah, just disdain.
I was gonna say even before you said that the line immediately before that is one of my favorites in the fight with Kaleo, where he says that he has 100,000 weapons in his head, and then it shows that Kaleo might be down for a lot of this fight at the start, but he's definitely not out. Like he, in a similar way to Leo in the previous fight we just talked about, he takes the stuff he learned from all the people he's interacted with, including people that have terrorized him before. Like right in that same post, he summons Mikage, the sword, another character also named Rue. Pay no mind.
No bias there whatsoever.
Not at all.
No, essentially, yeah, that's definitely a really good point because like Kaleo is losing and is on the back foot for the entirety of this fight, but is always still in it. Like Kaleo destroys trees, he creates lava traps, he goes all out. Where Adarath is essentially just like drinking mana sap and replenishing his mana the entirety of this fight. But it also is a nice foreshadow because it serves as it's probably the first real example that we get that Kaleo is more than just your average Hefe, because he's still popping out magic this entire time and keeping up with Adarath, who's a trained Anamarth graduate, high grade region using Fey, who has to keep replenishing his mana through this fight, but Kaleo never has to do it once. And it's that one of those first early examples that Kaleo's got a ton of potential under his hood.
Mhm. And just going to continue on for a bit. While this fight doesn't have nearly as much dialogue as the previous one, I do think there are some still pretty good back and forth moments between them. Partway through the fight, there's Adarath telling Kaleo, kind of like just touching upon his relationship with his sister, Kaleo's mother, just helping show something a bit more than just pure rage, and just showing like how much he grieves for her, like how much her loss upsets him. The whole thing with where he says, "Your mother was beloved by all her subjects, especially her little brother, who, despite her immense workload, she always found time to read him stories and give words of encouragement too." Just stuff like that that helps illustrate the yeah.
Where his resentment's coming from.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think there's always I love a part in that too, where it's like Adarath's like, I bet you don't even know her name, and then like Kaleo's like, I do know her name, and then like fucking like sucker punches him with a hit too. So it's both like that psychological sucker punch and that physical sucker punch. It's so good. This fight's not actually all that long, but there's so much emotion in every single post. And you really get to the meat of this one, which is we get to the end. These guys are like at death's door. Elo gets a bunch of art done for this fight, and there's like she goes to a specific image of like this gruesome, dead in his eyes Kaleo when we get to the end of it. And this is also where he turns blue because
Bluio.
yeah, Bluio starts here because this is he's done so much damage to himself through the mana that both these characters are just absolutely at their end. But Kaleo does win out at the end of the day. Like this fight has a clear ending. This is not ambiguous. This isn't like this was kind of a draw or something like that. Kaleo beats Adarath at the end of this fight 1-on-1.
And it's nice to have a conclusive ending to a fight. Since I feel like a lot of them, especially even in this list, kind of end a bit more ambiguously or just
Well,
you
they
know
peter out a little bit.
Yeah.
yeah yeah.
Yeah, this fight climaxes perfectly, and it's also such a dark ending. This fight ends with some body horror from Elo, which is essentially Kaleo pins him to the ground and turns Adarath's wings into chains that links Adarath to the ground, which I don't even think I need to explain the symbolism of to know why that's a big freaking deal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like Adarath is like he's like about to kill Adarath in the not just kill him, but kill him in the worst way possible.
Just turn him into an ice statue.
Yeah. Then of all people, because this is essentially like a running theme in our final fights, Gaia shows up at the very end.
Some symbology there.
Yeah, there is, and she essentially stops Kaleo from killing him, hugs
As in
him.
the background, providing moral support to you.
Yeah. He's just watching. He's at the popcorn moat. And essentially, there's this line here from Arath's perspective, which is the girl rushed in, hugging the cabin boy in her breast and begging for him not to become the thing Adarath had nearly created. The exhausted captain of the guard just remained there silent, unmoving as Kaya begged him not to, holding him tightly, like she was an older sister taking care of her little brother. This is the moment. This is the catalyst that humanizes Kaleo to Adarath. This entire time in all of Adarath's life, Kaleo's been this demon child, this catalyst of destruction. This anytime he shows up, Adarath's life gets worse. But this moment of seeing him being this younger brother thing, which reminds me of being a younger brother to Asmerilla, is humanizes like Kaleo and like it break like the dam breaks the resentment it washes like it almost if the resentment is like a dam of ice it breaks and just washes away in this moment. Adarath completely just breaks down. He apologizes. He tells Kaleo he was wrong, that he failed his sister, and it's so cool that it's this tender moment of Kaya and Kaleo in this almost sibling moment that is what brings it out for Adarath, and I love how that comes together. And Kaleo then takes the high ground and is literally like, I get it. I don't blame you for hurting me. After all, it's only because you loved your sister. You know her better than I ever could. And Kaleo takes this high ground despite this like incredibly dark place he went to and manages to walk it back. And he won. He had Adarath on death's door. This man's tried to kill him twice now, and it just really showcases Kaleo's strengths as a character.
Hmm. And I do like just like the small bit between Kaya, hugging him and his forgiveness of Adarath, where he's kind of just like stuck between, kind of like with his two selves, trying to like reconcile with like his rage, his anger, his like justified desire, his like justified anger at Adarath, and
There's not a single person who would be like shocked if Kaleo killed Adarath at
no,
this
no,
point.
definitely not.
I sure
And
wouldn't.
also like the whole bit where he's like, "Did I really look so terrifying?" Just how he's like, kind of like was almost like an out of body experience, I guess you could say, with him kind of almost like losing himself when he was about to try and kill Adarath.
And that moment also triggers a little bit of Kaleo's debate where he gets kind of caught in the middle of the Zack and Leo debate of chapter 7 of like, is it okay to kill or not? And this is the.
He kickstarts another long-going Kaleo arc.
Yes, it does. But this is kind of where we almost get to see the build up for that before that's even ever happened, because this is where he's coming to terms with the fact that like he's not doing well. Like he got really close to killing somebody, and it's just it's so good. Elo kills the writing for Kaleo throughout this entirety of this fight, between the ability of the emotion, the theming, the creativity, and the action. Like Kaleo doesn't use a single orthodox move, which is making me, in hindsight, wish I had sat down and just like wrote down some of the strategies that Kaleo uses just to showcase how elaborate she gets. It's just a really, really, really good fight. Like almost every single fight on this list, I have a nitpick for. I got nothing. I got no nitpicks for this fight.
And I do like how much of an impact this fight too has on like future chapters, especially in regards to Calio's growth and his conflicts and such. Not just like physically with like his overuse of mana and his turning into a blueberry, but just already been discussed his like conflict with to kill or not to kill, stuff like that.
Yeah, no, literally, like so much of what Kaleo goes through for the next two chapters is all a result of this specific moment, which just shows you like how much you can pull from how good it was. I think that plot covers everything I want to talk about. Did you guys have any other points in this fight you wanted to review?
Nothing from me. I think it's just pretty solid all around. Makes you wonder what we have in store for number one.
I'm pretty sure most people can guess number one at this point if they haven't already. So yeah, so in a moment, prepare for number one.
Dun dun dun.